Hello and welcome to Tech Talk, where you'll hear the latest in investment and technology trends directly from the trendsetters. I'm your host, Fritz Spencer, member of EisnerAmper's Technology and Life Sciences practice, and with me today is special guest Bernardo Perez-Villa, Senior Engagement Partner of Innovations at Cleveland Clinic. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to EisnerAmper wherever you listen to our podcasts. And you can also find us on YouTube at EisnerAmper. In this episode, we'll explore healthcare innovation, strategy, and execution. Today's insightful conversation could influence the next steps in your business. Bernardo, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you so much for the invite. And I have to first congratulate you for how you pronounce my last name so flawlessly.
Thank you. Now that I'm here in Miami, I need to learn how to pronounce everything perfectly. So to kick things off, if you could please introduce yourself and share a bit of your background.
Yes. So I'm a cardiologist by training. I was born and raised in Argentina. I moved to Spain, did my residency as a cardiologist. And after realizing that cardiology wasn't so fulfilling for me, I moved to entrepreneurship. And then from entrepreneurship, I ended up here in the United States with a startup that we use Alexa to collect clinical history automatically. That didn't fly. That wasn't successful. So instead now of retiring here in Florida, I'm working at Cleveland Clinic, Florida, and I'm working for the technology transfer office of Cleveland Clinic. And then we can talk a little more about what that means. But in a nutshell, my goal is to help Cleveland Clinic caregivers to develop intellectual property and to bring it to market.
At EisnerAmper, we are creative problem solvers that take a 360-degree approach focusing on you. We're an award-winning firm with decades of experience. EisnerAmper. Let's get you ready.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue. If you'd love to just jump right in and tell us about the innovation department that you're working with Cleveland Clinic.
Yes. Most of the hospitals, healthcare systems in the United States, they have a department that has different names. Ours is innovations. Other hospitals, they call it technology transfer offices, and most research places as well, they can call it translational research or similar names. And what we do is work with researchers, clinicians, and other caregivers, health caregivers, that they develop intellectual property. And by developing intellectual property, we mean they are developing a therapeutics, a diagnostic, or a medical device. And the first things that we do is to vet that idea from a market perspective, saying, is there a commercial opportunity for this technology that is being developed? And we help them move through all the process that, as you may know, it takes many, many years. We help them with the market assessment, with the intellectual property assessment, with the technology development, and finally with the licensing, or perhaps in the smaller percentage of cases, we spin off a company.
Very interesting. So what I'm curious to know is, are these innovators, are they with Cleveland Clinic? Are they external? Are they internal? Are you acquiring these entities or startups and building them yourselves? What does the business model look like from that standpoint?
That's a question that I hear all the time. And it's very interesting that you ask it. So 99% of the things that, I would say close to 99% of the things that we do are mainly internally. All the clinicians, all the caregivers that I work with is internally, what we call inside out. We develop our technology, our intellectual property, and then we commercialize it. So it's mainly internally. However, as you were mentioning, there are opportunities from external companies that they reach out to us all the time and say, hey, I have this technology that is going to make your workflow cheaper, better, faster. But that's not my department, because that's a sales pitch. And I don't buy. I'm the opposite. I'm selling. So when a startup is coming to me and they tell me that, I say, well, do you have a healthcare provider that is interested in that technology? And they say, no. Well, the first thing that you need to do is to find someone that is going to champion that technology. And perhaps then that startup finds that physician champion that is interested in that technology. And the physician say, well, instead of making it white, making it black, because it's going to improve patient care in X, Y, and Z. So then we are co-developing intellectual property. And that's where I play a role, meaning innovations department plays a role.
Thanks for explaining the source of your innovation and IP. And I'd love if you could cover a little bit more about the core thesis behind maybe the innovation strategy at Cleveland Clinic. What is your metrics or thesis that you kind of build around when you're looking at building IP?
Again, excellent questions in terms of how Cleveland Clinic is operating in this space of developing intellectual property. 3-4 years ago, Jeff Beans, the executive director of innovations, revamped the operating model. Most of the technology transfer offices, they operate with a model where one person is taking care of almost everything. Meaning one person, if let's say that Fritz is a surgeon that is developing this medical device for cardiothoracic surgery, and I am Bernardo, I'm your innovations manager. I do everything. I do the intellectual property assessment. I do the market assessment, and then I do the outreach to companies. I do the license agreement. Oh no, we need to do a startup. So there I go and find. So one person cannot do everything. So Jeff Beans revamped that. And if you check Cleveland Clinic Innovation website, you will see that we are a team of teams. A team of teams meaning that I am the first contact point for any Cleveland Clinic caregiver in Florida, and I vet those ideas. If that idea has a potential commercial value, moves from my engagement team to the assessment team. The assessment team does an intellectual property and market assessment. Then, if that comes with a green light, we move it to a technology development team. And from that technology development team moves either to the license and development team that we license the technology, or in some cases, we create a startup and we spin off that startup. Finally, there is a subgroup of a smaller number of IDF or invention disclosure forms or invention that they go to a proof of concept. That is, when the idea is not completely developed, we send it to this team where the idea is refined. So all in all, this sounds very siloed, that we have a team of teams, that the way that I explained it, it sounded like I moved a project from this bucket to this bucket to this bucket. However, we work all together and we communicate along the life of a project.
Got it. Yeah, it sounded a lot like, almost like an approval process like you'd hear about with the FDA. It's like you've modeled, here's the steps that they want us to take. Now we've moved those into teams, and you move this project through the pipeline, if you will, to kind of meet all those different, if you want to call it red tape, guidelines to go step by step.
Exactly. Those are the milestones that you're referring to. And obviously, we take it first. My role, well, now I'm involved as well with the business development and with the ventures team, because I'm in the Florida region for all the caregivers. So I touch different points of the process. But those milestones, they need to be very clear. And it's very difficult that one person is going to know everything. So at the end of the day, we all benefit from this team of teams. And moreover, the person that benefits the most is the inventor, because this is not a solo game. You need to have a team that is supporting you.
Understood. Speaking about those different teams developing different things, you must be seeing all kinds of healthcare technology come across your door. Could you tell me what emerging technologies that you guys are either working on or know about that you're most excited about?
Sure. I'm very excited about two major technologies that, as a matter of fact, they are coming from the Florida region. And Cleveland Clinic, just a little bit of background, in the Florida region, we have 5 hospitals with almost a little bit over 1,000 beds. And we have a bench research place, the Florida Research Innovation Center, that is in Port St. Lucie. And the acronym for that is FRIC. And the FRIC is the Florida Research Innovation Center is developing a Pan-antiviral treatment, meaning that instead, that the broad spectrum antibiotics, you can take amoxicillin and clavulanic, that is for a lot of bacteria. Well, now we are developing that, but for viruses. And that is coming out of here in Florida. That's incredible. From Dr. Michaela Gag, that is a world-renowned virology scientist. And the other one is the influenza vaccines, that instead of having just one influenza vaccine, that instead of having one influenza shot per year, you will be having one influenza shot, let's say, every 10 years, like any other vaccines that we have. And finally, the third project is a shunt. A shunt is a small hole that you create between an artery and a vein in order to treat pulmonary hypertension in your lungs and in your heart. That's another technology that is coming from Dr. Navia in the Florida region that it's incredible.
So much cool technology that you guys are building, and you must take a lot of due diligence and time and effort to evaluate them. What are some of the things that you guys do to evaluate potential investments on your own end?
The first thing is patient first. The motto of Cleveland Clinic is patient first. We need to improve patient outcomes. That's our main goal. At the end of the day, we want to improve patient outcomes, and yes, we need to have our role is to find a commercial return on investment. That's for sure. But what is the unmet clinical need? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Then finding product market fit for that is the secondary thing. It is okay, but if we are solving a real problem, a real unmet clinical need, I think that if I give you an example, can give you a little more of the criteria that we use. There are a lot of pediatric medical devices that people or inventors are trying to develop. However, a lot of people, they say, well, pediatrics is a small market. People are not going to invest into that. But that's another project that I'm working on. That is an incredible project. This is going to be something that is going to change pediatric in congenital diseases. And if it is improving patients, we are going to move it forward. And I'm pretty sure that we will find the sources and the financial resources to support this program.
Well, I'm glad to know that you're working on some of the pressing problems that face, specifically Florida, with our aging population, and there's a growth in population here, and even with younger, pediatrics as well. Can you give me an example of some of the pressing problems that you have to face personally during these, either with your innovation teams or within your own career?
Oof. Do we have an hour or more? No, I'm just kidding. I think that the problems are equal for everyone. It's when people say that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. I mean, by this, I mean bringing a technology to market. I don't think it's a marathon. It's a ultra marathon with crocodiles and with thunderstorms and with drought and rainy days and awful days. But we always say that there are three things that you need to have to bring a technology to market. Is the 3 Ps that we call it. The first P is you need to be passionate about this. You need to be patient about this. And second, you need to be persistent. And you need to grab one of those. Be passionate about this is everyone. Today, I just was having a call with some inventors, and they say, we want to do this, and this is amazing, and we are going to use. And I say, okay, but you need to be patient because you don't know if it is going to work. Yeah, but we want to do it. And okay, once that you hit the road and you see that no one is going to give you any money to develop this, you need to be persistent, and you need to also evaluate, am I doing, and I'm facing, and I'm trying to solve the right problem. Is this the right approach? And be humble. So those things, I think that are common for any kind of entrepreneur or intrapreneur. Then we have the other things that the market is not good, but when is the market good enough? And there are relative things that happen to everyone.
Well, I love the 3 Ps. I'm definitely going to steal those, and especially the order they're in. I feel like that is also very important. The passion and patience and persistence. I feel like the order that is in is equally as important as each of the words, but it's so funny. So I'd like to ask you, here at EisnerAmper, we're advisors, accountants, consultants. Is there a role that advisors play in your success in the innovations department?
Yes, we count a lot. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are a team of team. And if you're referring to external mentors, external advisors, when we create a startup, when we spin off a company, obviously we try to engage with as many mentors and advisors that we can rely in order to move the technologies to market, because this is very dynamic. And we also do a voice of customer where we validate our technologies. So yes, once again, this is not a solo game. It's a very dynamic, very changing environment, and you need to be hearing and aware of any minimal change, because it's another thing that you will be hearing all the time is the timing. Maybe today it wasn't right, or this year is not the right year for the technology, but next one it could be the best year for your technology. And I can give you a very brief example. There was a technology that we were the nurses were developing a small piece of plastic for pediatric patients that was going to use to separate IV lines. And that was going to be a commodity. No one was going to pay out of that. And however, then in the pandemic, they reused that technology and they say, instead of using it to separate the IV lines for pediatric patients, let's take the IV lines outside the patient's room. We don't need to be changing all the equipment of the doctors, and that's going to save us money. So if it weren't because of COVID and this inventors, they saw a new opportunity and they find advisors and say, hey, now we can use that idea, wouldn't have been available on the market today.
I love to hear about a pivotal moment in any kind of startup because I feel like they happen so frequently. So definitely thank you for sharing that. And I'd love if you could leave us with some closing remarks to some of the inventors or even investors that might be listening.
Don't breathe your own exhaust. Once again, the 3 Ps for me are critical. And as you mentioned, the order, passion is perhaps the easiest one, changing all the time between patient and persistence. So when you're frustrated and you say, now I'm not going to do that. I think that we need to quit. Well, perhaps you don't need to quit. Perhaps you need to pivot, as you were mentioning. We can add a 4 P if you want, Fritz, and we can co-author if you want the 4 Ps, adding to the passion, persistence, and patience, the pivoting moment where you need to say, okay, now it's time to, instead of going to the left, let's go to the right.
Yeah, so important to be able to pivot. The ability to pivot is so much more important than the pivot itself. I totally agree with you. It might be a sub P somewhere in the 3 Ps.
Yeah, the awareness, right? The awareness of saying, of taking those 2 minutes and saying what I'm doing and why I'm doing what I'm doing and being in self-conscious of that. It's very difficult because we are embedded in our own mind. At the end of the day, we want to be successful so other people is healthier in healthcare. We want to do that because seriously, selfishly, I want to improve healthcare because I want my son to have the best healthcare in the world. And I want my wife and I want to be having the best healthcare service when I need it.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. Well, Bernardo, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me today.
Anytime. Thank you so much for your time. And it was a pleasure and very fun to have a conversation with you guys.
Likewise. And for those who'd like to follow what the Cleveland Clinic Innovations are working on, what's the best way to connect with you?
So they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can share a link, and then I can also share a link up from Cleveland Clinic Innovations LinkedIn website on our website.
Great. And we'll have all that information for you listening in the description below. Thanks again, Bernardo, and a special thanks to our listeners for tuning into Tech Talk, the entrepreneurs and innovators who turn to EisnerAmper for accounting, tax, and advisory solutions to help propel their business forward. Again, subscribe to EisnerAmper Podcast to listen to more Tech Talk episodes or visit EisnerAmper.com for more tech news that you can use.